Hey everyone, I hope everyone's having a great Wednesday. It's about 2 p.m. and it's time for Trailblazing Trademarks. I'd love to know who all is with me today. I bet everyone is watching the Mueller hearings, right? I was actually listening to a little bit of it and I was like, I really have to focus. But anyway, I am happy whoever's here, and if you're picking this up on a recording, welcome to Trailblazing Trademarks, where I talk about really great trademarks. I also talk about some trademark fails. Those are always fun to learn from, and I answer questions that are submitted to me. So I have a few things to, get set up here. Okay, so I have 3 questions that I'm going to get to today. I've got one trailblazing trademark that I want to talk about, and I have 2 trademark fails. So we'll get started on the trailblazing trademark. This week it's Crank and Boom. And this company is actually out of Lexington, Kentucky. And the cool thing about Crank and Boom, other than the fact that they're my client, is that they started out in a food truck. And they basically make hand-churned or handmade ice cream, hence the name Crank. So I think that's really cool. And the and boom part, I think that means like it's immediately produced. So it's like crank and then boom, you have your ice cream. So I think that's such a cool, I think it's a cool trademark. They've been around since probably 2014. Their website is Crank and Boom. I strongly suggest that you check it out. And actually, I take that back. I'm looking at some of their information. Crank and Boom they were actually looking for a dessert option. And this was a little bit before 2014. And they actually had a Thai restaurant also. So they started making this ice cream out of a 2-quart Cuisinart ice cream maker that apparently they'd spent like $60 on. So they started making these small batches of ice cream using local ingredients and fresh ingredients, which is pretty cool. And they started out in a food truck, and now they have at least one location in Lexington, Kentucky. You can also have them at your wedding or your events, and festivals, corporate retreats, and things like that. So if you are in the Lexington, Kentucky area, of course, they might be someone that you might want to reach out to. And they also do wholesale. So if you're not in Lexington area, you might be able to find the ice cream at Whole Foods. I know that I've seen it at several Whole Foods outside of Kentucky, so look for Crank and Boom. Like I said, they have really exotic flavors. It's a fun brand. They're doing some really great things. The owner, her name's Tao. She's a great person, so make sure you check out Crank and Boom. And again, this is what I consider a trailblazing trademark. One thing I love about the trademark itself is that it's not an arbitrary mark, and I've talked about arbitrary marks and how arbitrary marks it would be almost like you were opening up a dictionary and pointing to a word and said, boom, there's my trademark, my totally unrelated word for my product. And an example of an arbitrary mark, I use it all the time, Apple computers, that's an arbitrary mark. The word Apple, the trademark Apple, has no relationship to the underlying products, which are computers. And another one would be Camel cigarettes. So I kind of hate using like a cigarette example, but wait till I get to another question I have in a minute. So we'll kind of be along the same. This is going to be like the Facebook Live of vices. So we're here. Anyway, we've got our ice cream, we've got our good fattening stuff. We're going to talk about cigarettes. We're going to talk about cannabis in a minute. But back to arbitrary marks again. Those terms are just just picked up from the dictionary. That's how you could come up with an arbitrary term. And Camel brand cigarettes is an arbitrary term. So I think that arbitrary terms, like they're kind of easy, right? Like you could probably just open up the dictionary and find a term that is totally unrelated to your products. That'd be really easy. Now you're running into a few problems if you do that. first of all, it's going to be harder to get that trademark registered. It's getting harder and harder just because there's so many just real words that are subject to trademark protection. So you might have a lot to navigate with the USPTO, something to keep in mind. Another issue with arbitrary marks is that there's not that emotional connection with the consumer. And I think that's really important when you're creating your trademark, is that you create a brand name that actually has some type of emotional connection to the consumer. Like it makes them smile or laugh, like the term crank and boom. I mean, it kind of piques your interest. You don't know immediately what it is. So that's another great thing about it. And it kind of alludes, like, okay, what's being cranked? This is interesting. And then when you learn about what the product is, you're like, oh, that's a really cool trademark. It makes people smile. But of course, it's ice cream, right? So like, I mean, that usually makes everybody smile. It makes me smile. It's one of my favorite things ever. Ice cream. So huge shout out to Crank and Boom and Tal in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm really happy for you guys. It sounds like you all are doing great. I've been to the location at the summit and we had a great time. And I can't remember what I got. I want to say it was like a butter pecan, but they have some, I think that's like with a bourbon flavor. So good stuff. Okay, so now I want to talk about a trademark fail. I've got 2 trademark fails. And the first one is a little boring and the second one's funny. So this first one, this applicant with the USPTO filed an application for the trademark Rough Chewers for dog toys. Okay, trademark, right? Like, I mean, a little weak. Well, they got a refusal to register, gasp, based on the mark Rough Chews for dog beds. Okay, someone did not do at least their preliminary searching before they filed this trademark. Here's the deal. Something like dog toys, dog beds, even though they're different products, they're going to travel in the same channels of trade. They're going to be in similar stores. There's a good chance they're going to be, if it's a smaller store, like a grocery store, it's a good chance that the products could be on the exact same shelf, right? So they could be close to each other. Consumers can see these and think that Rough Chewers for toys is the same or comes from the same source as the Rough Chews for dog beds. So this was a situation where that, probably a quick preliminary search would have prevented these people from filing this trademark application. I mean, maybe they did and they didn't think about it, but one good rule here, one good takeaway is that when you're searching and you're doing your own preliminary searching, make sure you search for just little differences in maybe spellings of a mark and maybe search minor variations. So for example, this trademark that was rejected is Rough Chewers, Chewers, Chewers. The mark they were rejected on was Rough Chews. So they should have searched CHEW, right? So they could have included some more results if they had searched. Another thought here is that the term rough here is spelled RUFF, which makes sense because we're dealing with, roughs. I've got my little woof back here with me and I'll let her say hello here in a few minutes. But just something to think about is when you're doing these searches on your own, search for spelling variations. ROUGH, could be searched. If you are searching, if your trademark has the word ATE, ATE, you might want to search EIGHT or the number 8 just to cover your bases. And again, search variations of marks like chewer. You would want to search the word chew. So get rid of the ERs, get rid of the plural, get rid of the ING. You might want to get rid of if you have an RE in the front of your term. Now, these are tips again, like if you're doing your own searches. If you outsource the search to a third party, I use CompuMark, their software saves a lot of time because the cool thing is it searches these variations for us. So I mean, you could go down a rabbit hole and be searching all day long and not ever come up, with certain, or never come to the end of the possibilities that you could be searching. So something to think about, after you do your own preliminary / knockout search. I call them quick and dirties also. You really consider whether or not you do want to take another step and outsource and do that comprehensive, that deep dive. So it can definitely save people a lot of time and money and headache in the long run. Okay, I want to see if I wanted to say anything about anything else. But yeah, in this situation, the USPTO did refuse the mark rough chewers. It was just too close to rough chew for dog toys, and I agree with this whole thing. I think it was good. I don't always agree, but I usually do. So anyway, that was a really good one. Now, the other trademark fail that I want to talk about is a portmanteau. And if you've been listening to me long enough, you know that I really love portmanteau trademarks. And this is when you take two terms and you kind of squish them together to make your own trademark. Some people hate these. I love them. We already use portmanteaus probably every single day. If you say something about smog, that's smoke and fog. If you might be eating with a spork, which is a spoon and fork. So these can also, if as long as they're not already used in the general lexicon, they can also be trademarks. And I think it was a couple of weeks ago I gave an example of one of my favorite trademarks, one of my favorite brands, and one of my favorite companies, Strawsome. They took the term straw and the term awesome and Strawsome. And the term Strawsome isn't overly used, right? Like, it's not already in the general lexicon. It acts as a source indicator or a trademark for that company, the company that sells these glass straws. So Strawsome is a portmanteau. It's awesome. Always consider portmanteaus when you're going through the trademark creation process. Now, you be careful when you're squishing words together. So I came across a couple of funny ones. And one was, I'll start with this first one. It's not that bad of a fail, but it kind of was weird. Smart Tours, and that's SMARTOURS. So it's questionable whether or not it's like a true portmanteau, but when you look at it, you don't know if it's saying smart tours or smart hours. So in addition to the fact that the term smart is used, which I'm usually just say don't use the word smart in a trademark because it's so overused, like the word eco and green and things like that. There are certain trademarks you'll see, or elements of trademarks that become really, really popular, really trendy, and smart is one of them. So this company is Smart Tours, and I was confused when I first saw this because I was like, is it smart hours? And then I was like, oh, okay, it's Smart Tours. So when you're making these portmanteaus, make sure they make sense. Now, the other one I want to talk about is hilarious. It's called Pool Life, and you can find them at www.poolife.com. So they took the letter L and use it for both the word pool and life, but they got rid of one of the L. So when you look at it, it almost looks like poo life. So they just took these two terms, they slammed them together, and they ended up with this sort of portmanteau. And I don't know. I'm sure they're a great company, but it's actually kind of funny. So we'll give them a little bit of a comedy shout out here because poo life and not pool life is kind of hilarious. I think it's funny. So those are my trademark fails. And actually, I guess I did 3 trademark fails instead of 2. But yeah, the trademark fails are rough chewers because someone didn't do their searching before they filed. And my second one was Smart Tours, Smart Hours. And then the last one, of course, is Poo Life. So take that. Now, some questions. I want to get to a few questions that I had submitted to me. Now, remember, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to email them to me. And I like to take a little time whenever I do Trailblazing Trademarks to try to get to a few of them. So I've got 3 that I'm going to be able to get to. Let's see, I've got 2 that I'm going to get to today. And then I've got 3 little questions that I will get to the next time we talk, and particularly because one of them, it came to me a little late, and I don't know the answer to it. I will admit when I don't know the answer to something. So I don't know the answer, and I am going to have to do a little bit of research on it, but I'll kind of dig into what I know, but we'll talk about it in more depth in a future Trailblazing Trademarks episode. But the first question that I wanted to address today is someone had asked me, can you trademark a catchphrase or slogan? Yes, you can. So an example of some catchphrases or slogans would be "Just Do It" by Nike, "I'm Loving It" by McDonald's. Another one is "Taste the Rainbow," and I think I use that as sort of the top of one of my Trailblazing Trademarks Facebook Live announcements. And then today, when I sent out my announcement about our Facebook Live, I mentioned "That's Hot." That was a Paris Hilton registration. I kind of feel like that. I feel like that's so old for some reason. I feel like I don't really see her out and about very much, but maybe I just don't pay attention to celebrities like I did 15 years ago. But she filed for "That's Hot" and has a couple registrations for it. So good for her. But yes, you can register a catchphrase or slogan as long as it acts as a source indicator, right? So when someone sees it, they know what the source of it is. When someone sees the words "That's hot," maybe not so much now, but 10 years ago, people probably were like, "Oh, hey, that's Paris Hilton, on a bag or something." If you hear or someone say, "I'm loving it," or if you see that slogan, McDonald's. So there are some issues with these types of terms, and one of them is that sometimes these become so popularly used in the general lexicon that they cannot function as trademarks. For example, you hear a lot of like "city strong," like "Boston strong." That's just used. That isn't the source indicator for one single entity. "Black Lives Matter" is another one. Another one would be "Me Too." So be very careful when you're trying to take these, if you want to take these really trendy phrases and try to use them as a trademark, you could run into problems there. I've seen people try to do this, and I've actually filed oppositions against companies who try to register these types of terms because everyone, there's certain terms that are just so commonly used in the general lexicon that everyone should get to use them. Not one specific entity can claim it as a trademark. So be careful if you come across certain terms that seem super cool and trendy, because number one, they're not going to act as a source indicator for you, and number two, trends come and go. So by the time your trademark gets registered, and anyone who's gone through that process knows it's not an overnight thing, by the time it gets registered, the trend is probably gone. So, just be very careful about those slogans or those things that you see out on Facebook and Instagram that just seem really popularly used. And at some point, I think I will talk about hashtags, because this is another issue that I'm seeing a lot more of, even if someone doesn't ask me the question. I think I'll talk about hashtags and using brand names as a hashtag. So many of us are on Instagram and other social media platforms, and we have a tendency to do that, to use that hashtag. And I actually used a hashtag the other day. That's a brand name. So so I gave them a big shout out, but I don't know, if they send me an email, I'll talk to them about it and see what happens. But I think it should be fine, but it's something that I am going to look into, and I think it's information that people will find very beneficial. Another question: does my U.S. federally registered trademark protect me in other countries? So the quick answer is no. Remember that trademark law is jurisdictional, and this means that every country has its own laws and processes that trademark applications go through in order to be granted rights to the trademark. So if you want to be granted rights in Australia, your US registration doesn't mean anything in Australia. So you will need to file for trademark protection in Australia. And of course, every country has different laws. And one major example of that is that in the US, we are on a first to use system. So in the US, you can be granted common law rights to the trademark when you first start using it. Most other countries, including China, don't recognize this. It's a first to file system. Now, if you're interested in foreign filing, you do have several options. One would be filing via the Madrid Protocol, which makes some of the process a little bit simpler. There are some negative aspects. If you're interested in filing in just the European Union and getting a protection in all of the member countries of the EU, then you can file, instead of filing in every EU member country, you can file and get protection in the entire European Union. That brings me to Brexit, right? Like, I thought that was one of those things that was gone and like we weren't going to have to worry about, but it sounds like maybe with this new election of Boris Johnson, I guess it's an election, I don't quite understand the UK processes, but my understanding is that it seems like Brexit is probably going to happen. So if you currently have a registration for your trademark in the European Union, then you need to talk with your attorney about how and if you're going to be able to have that extended into the UK. I believe that's going to be what happens. I believe the UK will actually recognize EU registrations after Brexit actually happens, after the whole thing happens. And speaking of Brexit and portmanteaus, Brexit is a portmanteau. So Britain and exit. So little side note. But just something to keep in mind, that if you do have an EU registration and, UK is specifically important to you, you might want to speak with your counsel about how Brexit is going to impact that UK registration. Again, I think that they're just going to kind of grandfather EU registrations in, but I don't know the answer to that yet. And I don't think anyone definitely knows. I think they're still trying to figure all that out. And I kind of feel like maybe some things were on hold with all of this because there might have been some thinking that Brexit was not going to actually happen, but it sounds like it's going to. So I hope you found that information helpful. Now, I'm just going to mention 3 things that I'm going to talk about next time I do Trailblazing Trademarks. First of all, I got a question today from an influencer, and influencers are people who make a lot of their income by kind of being popular on social media. That's my understanding of influencer. I think I'm a little bit out of the influencer age range where I, completely get a grasp of that. But if someone has a better definition, let me know. But this influencer, it's really cool, who had asked me, like, I am having some trademark issues and I need to know what I need to think about as an Instagram influencer in terms of protecting me and my intellectual property. So I'm going to be talking about that next week. So hold on that. I think it'll be really interesting. I am going to I say next week, I might do a Trailblazing Trademarks again a little sooner. I haven't really decided yet. The other thing I'm going to talk about, and this is going to be interesting, is cannabis related goods and services, because there have been some changes to the U.S. laws, particularly the Farm Bill, right? And the USPTO is trying to kind of figure out what goods and services can be registered with respect to cannabis products and services. And I don't really know the answer to that right now. So I'm going to need to put my lawyer hat on, my research hat, and look into this a little bit. I haven't had any clients today specifically file for cannabis goods or services, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next year, a couple of years, to see if marijuana gets completely decriminalized. Hopefully it will. I think that we're kind of beyond, having kind of the government keep that a criminal. I guess it's a class 1 drug. I think that's what it's considered. So hopefully they'll declassify that, and then I think that's the correct language, and then decriminalize it, and people will be able to file for trademark registration on the federal level for products that are related to that industry, either marijuana or there's obviously a huge industry around it in states that have kind of legalized it recreationally, like especially Colorado and California. There could be a lot of trademarks that need to be filed at some point. So I think that could be just a great growth industry. I say legalize it and tax it. We'll see what happens. So I am going to talk about that next time when we get together. I'm going to dig in on that a little bit and try to get better answers for you all. Currently, the USPTO will not permit the registration of a trademark for a product or service that's considered illegal. So that's kind of the hang up there. But we'll see how things change over the next few years. I know that several candidates have called for for 2020 have called for complete decriminalization. So I think that it's going to be something that people are going to be talking about a lot over the next year. Speaking of the 2020 election, I am going to talk at our next Trailblazing Trademarks event about slogans, campaign slogans for 2020. And I'm going to go through a few of the interesting ones. We're going to talk about Make America Great Again, and something interesting that I discovered about that trademark after I put on my attorney investigation hat. And I'm going to just put it out there and talk to you all about it. So it's very interesting, and I feel like it's kind of timely, especially since we have the Mueller hearings going on right now as I speak. So anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching this video, whether you're here live or you're picking this up on YouTube or a replay. Again, please shoot over any questions to me that you might have about trademarks. That's what I love. It's what I love to talk about. And of course, if you are the owner of a Trailblazing trademark, let me know. I would love to talk about you. If you have any great ideas for Trailblazing trademarks, let me know. I would love to talk about them. So thank you guys so much, and I hope that you have a happy hump day, and I'll see you at the next Trailblazing Trademarks. Bye.